28 of the podcast. It is Swimming America, the Outdoor Sports Podcast. It is Sunday, March 3rd, 2024. People, hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody enjoys our new standard Sunday night reaction show. Obviously, this will drop on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel immediately, and then on the podcast feeds late Sunday night. And when I tell you, after a busy weekend of all sorts of things, we have ourselves a jam-packed show. Oh, we got ourselves a jam-packed show. We're actually going to open just a little bit of football. So something happened this weekend. The combine is going on. Caleb Williams is acting weird. And your boy Torres has a little bit of a conspiracy theory as to why Caleb Williams is making the decisions that he is. I'm going to explain to you what my Caleb Williams conspiracy theory is. From there, we'll get to college hoops. Tennessee beats Bama. Listen, I'm going to say it. It's unpopular. I'm rooting for Rick Barnes. Enough smearing of Rick Barnes' name. We're going to explain that. I will talk a little bit about Kentucky, Arkansas. Feels like there was a lot of negativity with Kentucky, after the win against Arkansas. Is their defense struggling, whatever. And we will talk UConn, first Big East outright title since 1999, baby. So we got ourselves a jam-packed show. Before we get started, a couple quick announcements. One, first of all, if you're watching on YouTube, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe. Hit that little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Put on notifications. Also, do your boy a favor. Like this video. It really does help. Again, if you're not subscribed, come back and do so. You can also listen, as always, on Apple and Spotify. We are ramping up. March is here. And I should mention, before we get started on today's show, what I've mentioned in the last couple episodes. We are excited to be working with BetUS Sportsbook from now until the end of March Madness. So BetUS, we've been working with them for about 2 weeks now, and I'm just here to tell you, I have had a blast working with them. Hate to brag, my picks have been red hot. I had the UConn Seton Hall over on Sunday afternoon. That hit with like 6 minutes to go in the game. Not bragging, because I can get cold really quick, but BetUS is my sports book. It's who I'm rocking with. And here is the best part about working with BetUS. They have an incredible offer for listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod. Here is what it is. You can, and this is what BetUS is going to do for you. They will match 125% of your first 3 deposits. So you put in $100, they give you 125. You lose all that, they give you another 125 if you put in 100. And if you lose the second batch, the third time around, you get another 125% deposit match. First 3 deposits, we appreciate BetUS. The link to take advantage is in that show description. So thank you to BetUS. We are excited to be working with them. With that said, it was a busy weekend. I do want to get started. Now, I will say this. I do want to talk football, and we're going to get to the combine in a minute. But I would be remiss if I didn't spend about 2 minutes here off the top, just very quickly reacting to the news that we saw on Sunday afternoon, that ESPN legend Chris Mortensen passed away at the age of 73. As I'm recording, not very many details right now. I saw Daniel Jeremiah from the combine say that he spoke with him yesterday. So I don't have very many details, but listen, like so many of you, there's a lot of people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. They grew up with Mort. It's synonymous, right? Same way we say Woj or Shefty or whomever. That is who Chris Mortensen was. I think anyone, again, between the ages of about 25 and 45 grew up with this guy on their TV. And so because of it, just wanted to say a quick, rest in peace. It's an awful story. 73 years old. And again, he was the original insider. I think there are so many people that are my age that when they grew up wanting to work in sports, it was because of guys like Chris Mortensen. So awful news to start the show, but wanted to just give him a quick moment because, again, like so many of you, he was so influential in everything related to sports. So rest in peace to Chris Mortensen at the age of 73. With that said, let's go ahead and switch gears and let's get into football because, listen, bottom line is this. It's been a few weeks since we have done anything football really heavy on this show. And a lot of that is the Super Bowl finishes. There's not that much going on. College football's done. The portal's closed. There's no more coaching news or notes. So it's been a quiet couple weeks in the football world. Of course, if you love football, you know that over the last couple days, the NFL Combine has been going on in Indianapolis. There's a lot going on. I saw Xavier Worthy actually set a Combine record for the 40-yard dash. There's all sorts of other stuff. J.J. McCarthy was throwing. Joe Milton was throwing. Joe Milton is the whole cycle we just had with Tennessee the last 2 years with Joe Milton is happening in the NFL. So listen, there's a lot going on with the Combine. There are other shows that will break down every little nuance of it. We're not going to do it here, but instead, what I do want to talk about is one big thing, because I have had a few of you ask me about it. And they've said to me, a lot of you have asked me, Torres, what the heck is going on with Caleb Williams? It feels like there's something weird here. It feels like there's something strange going on. What's really going on? What do you think? And I'll tell you this. I have a little bit of a Caleb Williams conspiracy theory coming for you. Now, before we get to it, let me start by saying this. Listen, the Caleb Williams stuff has been going on really since the summer, right? Go back to the summertime. His dad did an interview with GQ. He was in GQ. And the dad, listen, he's not going full of our ball. He's not going full whoever. But he's starting to get into that, like, starting to, he's kind of out there. Not out there like, out there, but out there like he's too public facing. And even back in the summer, there was the interview with Caleb Williams' dad where he basically said, yeah, maybe we aren't going to go to the NFL after this year. Maybe we would consider coming back. Now, that was always ridiculous at the time. But the one thing that has been obvious from the beginning is that Caleb Williams isn't going, or his camp at the very least, is not just going to go with the status quo because that's how it's always been. He knows he's the number one pick. He knows he has leverage. I know that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, ESPN and all of these outlets are going to try to sell you that can Jaden Daniels sneak up? Can Drake May sneak up? No, Caleb Williams is going to be the number one pick in the draft. But obviously, again, there's something going on. Shows up at the Combine, doesn't do any medical testing. I thought it was worth noting. He's basically the first player in the history of the Combine to refuse to release his medicals to certain teams, which is a very, very interesting caveat that we'll get into a second. And it all leads me to my conspiracy theory, which is this. I don't believe that based on Caleb Williams' actions, and also I do believe that based on some other stuff that's going on behind the scenes, I believe that he is actively behind the scenes trying to get himself to Washington, which has the number 2 pick. I'm not saying it's done. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but my prediction is that give it a couple weeks, but by the start of next football season, when Caleb Williams runs out of the tunnel in week 1 as an NFL player, it will be as a member of the Washington Commanders. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, one, certainly there's been talk about the Commanders potentially moving up, but a lot of you probably sitting there saying, Torres, why would you say that? And I think there's a couple things. One, it is so obvious Caleb Williams does not want to be a Bear, and I'll defend him a little bit. I don't know that I blame him for not wanting to be a Bear. Now, listen, I love Chicago, been there a million times. I want the Bears to be good because it'd just be a fun story to follow. But we're going on a 100-year track record that they have not developed a quarterback pretty much ever, okay? So you have that. You have the fact that their head coach got basically a reprieve over the second half of the year, but he could be fired in a year, and in a year you could be starting over. So to me, it seems obvious that he doesn't want to be a Bear. He's saying all the right things, but beyond that, here's the interesting part. That thing about him not releasing medicals is very, very, very interesting, and let me explain why. And I think this is, by the way, where my kind of crossover, where I cover college football, but I cover college basketball, and I know people in both spaces, I think it's where it kicks in, okay? Because this is actually a very common thing in basketball, to go to the Combine or to meet with teams, but basically refuse to release your medicals to teams that you do not want to potentially go to, work with, participate in, whatever. And so I bring it up because this actually happens all the time in the NBA. I remember about 6, 7 years ago, it was when the Sacramento Kings were really, really, really bad. And I remember there was like some crazy stat where it was like 19 of the top 20 projected picks refused to release their medicals to Sacramento because nobody wanted to go there. And basically, that is how a player holds leverage over a team. A player can't stop a team from drafting them, but at the same time, what they can do is basically say, look, you could draft me, but who knows what you're going to find once you get me in the building. You know I don't want to be there, so let's figure out a way to get me to where I want to go. So not releasing the medicals is important. And I think the question now becomes, why would it be Washington? Well, first off, remember, Caleb Williams is from Washington, D.C. And so I think he's looking at it. I don't want to play for the Bears. Most of these other places are probably not realistic that I would love to go to. Obviously, he spent a lot of time in LA. I know in LA, there was a thought before the season, if the Rams bottom out, could they be in position to get the number one pick? They didn't. Sean McVay's a genius. They're rolling with Matthew Stafford, whatever. So where else could I land that makes sense? Well, he's from Washington, D.C. They are obviously completely rebuilding that franchise. Oh, by the way, you know who their offensive coordinator is. It's his old buddy, Cliff Kingsbury, who, of course, was on the coaching staff at USC this past year. So you have the hometown kid who I think looks at it and says, I can go to my hometown, and if I'm the guy that saves this sorry franchise, guess what? I'm essentially a legend for the rest of my life. And so that's part of it. What I also think is part of it, which I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, maybe they're talking about it in DC. If they are, forgive me. I don't think that ownership group is going to stand pat. Remember, Washington got new ownership before basically last season. Josh Harris and his group took over for Daniel Snyder. This is a billionaire. Paid like $6-7 billion for this team. I believe it was the highest transaction ever for a team. Do you think, one, he wants to go through a 2, 3, 4-year rebuild? Because I don't. Two, do you think that Drake May or Jaden Daniels is splashy enough for a new owner who just spent $6 billion on this team? To me, it feels like there has to be something bigger. We know how these businessmen work. Think about in the NBA. Matt Ishbia buys the Phoenix Suns. Couple months later, what do? They trade for Kevin Durant. He's like, we got a chance to get KD. We're going for it. And I think it's going to be the same in Washington. You don't come in. You don't hire Dan Quinn. You don't do nothing of consequence now going into your second year. So you have a chance to get Caleb Williams. You have a chance to reset everything with the franchise. And I think from the Bears' perspective, it kind of makes sense too. Because think about it. If you're the Bears, it's obvious Caleb Williams doesn't want to be there. But if you trade back to 2, you know Washington wants this guy. And by the way, maybe it's somebody else, but I think it's Washington. You know they're going to give up whatever it takes to get him. So you're going to get even more picks, more opportunities, more this, more that. And you can still draft a quarterback at number 2. And so if you deem that there isn't that much difference between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, Drake May and Caleb Williams, whoever, Michael Penix and Caleb Williams, then you go ahead and draft the guy that you want. I still don't think Justin Fields is coming back, but what you can then do is basic. And by the way, you're going to be meeting with all these guys anyway because you have the number 1 pick, and in theory, you could be drafting them. So that's my half-baked NFL combine theory. Coming out of the combine, Caleb Williams acting weird. He's not releasing his medicals. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that he is pushing to become a member of the Washington Commanders, and we'll see what happens. That is my Caleb Williams conspiracy theory here on March 3rd, 2024. We'll see what happens, but there's something going on. By the way, I didn't even reference it. The Kingsbury thing, maybe it means nothing, but I think it probably means something. Probably a guy that he's comfortable working with, probably a guy that he'd prefer to work with over whoever the heck is the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator. I think there's something going on. I think there's something quietly going on behind the scenes. And I think Washington is kind of angling to put themselves in position to get Caleb Williams. We will clip this off. And if I'm right, you will never hear the end of it. If we're wrong, we probably won't talk about it again. Caleb Williams is a Bear, and he's playing Jared Goff in week 1 next year with the Lions, then we probably won't talk about it. But that is your Torres, Caleb Williams, NFL Combine. Conspiracy theory. With that said, let's go ahead and switch gears because it was a busy weekend in college hoops. And I'll be honest, college hoops felt like it was so exciting on Saturday. I didn't even know if I was going to talk NFL. Now, NFL Combine, football, we talk a ton of football on this show. Football's king, so I felt like I had to lead with the Combine. But this was just a great Saturday of basketball. We previewed it over the course of the weekend. We previewed it on Friday's show, I should say. We obviously have talked a ton about it here over the last couple days, and I bring it up because we are now at just a really, really fun time of the year, and credit where it is due, because this was the first weekend where, listen, I'm not here to tear down or build up any other networks other than, whatever, but I thought ESPN, Fox, CBS, everybody had big games. They were all kind of staggered, so you start early. You start with, Florida, South Carolina. You go into Kentucky, Arkansas, all the way to Gonzaga, St. Mary's at the end of the night. And we just had an awesome, awesome day of hoops. With that said, let's jump in to what was obviously the signature game of the weekend. It was that top 15 showdown, Coleman Coliseum, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the Tennessee Vols traveled to Alabama to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Both teams ranked in the top 15. Both teams tied atop the SEC standings. It goes without saying, you don't have to be great at math to know the winner of this game was going to have first place in sole possession with a week and a half to go of the SEC. And on Saturday night, the Tennessee Volunteers did it. They went into Coleman Coliseum and got the win 81-74. And when I look at this game, first of all, listen, this was kind of like, I'm just going to say it. Yes, I talk a lot about myself, but my name's on the show, right? This was kind of one of those draw the line in the sand games for me, because I've been saying since the rosters came together last spring, I said, I truly believe that Tennessee is the best team in the SEC. To take it a step further, I've also said all year, I think this is Nate Oates' best coaching job because he doesn't have a Herb Jones. He doesn't have a Brandon Miller. He doesn't have future NBA dudes up and down this roster. As a matter of fact, I think you might have a couple NBA players, but they're a year or two away. Grant Nelson isn't declaring after this year. I think he'll come back for another year. Mark Sears is not an NBA player. Sam Walters may get there, on and on. You get the point. But I thought Nate Oates was overachieving with this group. I thought Tennessee was the best team, but I thought Tennessee, we talk about them nonstop. If you are a true national title contender, go to Tuscaloosa and show the world, beat Alabama. Now, that's not to say if they didn't win that I'd be tearing them apart, but I thought this was such a signature win. But I'll take it a step further. I also think it was a signature win, not just because they won, but because of how it happened. On Friday's show, we talked about Dalton Knecht potentially being National Player of the Year. Obviously, I don't think that he did anything to hurt himself on Saturday. I don't think he did anything to help himself. I still think there's 2 weeks left in the season. Zach Edey is in the driver's seat, but I don't think Dalton Knecht is that far behind. But what's interesting about this game, Dalton Knecht was in foul trouble, finished with 13 points in this game. And you know why Tennessee won? They won for the reasons that I told you they were going to win. And that is because this is the best, most unique Tennessee team of the last couple of years. What do I mean by that? They are a team that has a star in Dalton Knecht offensively, but then as important, they also still play really well defensively. And I think that's what's been lost this year with the Dalton Knecht hysteria, is that this team is still really good defensively. Came into the weekend number 2 in field goal percentage defense, only behind Houston, and that is exactly what we saw on Saturday. It wasn't Dalton Knecht. It was the defense that took care of business against an Alabama team that had scored 90-plus points in its last 5 games. They hold them to 74 points, 38% shooting, 9 of 37 from the three-point arc. And so this to me, and I've been saying it since the beginning of the year, this is why I believe this Tennessee squad is different. Because when you look at this Tennessee squad, what you see is all of the best elements of previous years with this newfound thing of a dude that can literally get you 40 on any given night. Tennessee in this game proved if they need to win by clamping down on defense, they can do it. But at the same time, they can also win a game like they did at Rupp Arena a few weeks ago when they had to put up 102 points because Kentucky put up 95. And so when I look at this Tennessee team, I do believe it's different. I do believe that this is the best Rick Barnes team that he has had since he has gotten to Tennessee. And while it certainly doesn't guarantee anything, I'm also going to say something that's going to be a little bit controversial, but I don't really care. I'm just going to say it. I am rooting for Rick Barnes, and I am rooting for Tennessee in this NCAA tournament. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a Vol fan, doesn't mean I'm a homer, doesn't mean that I hate your team. But I think the narrative about Rick Barnes is honestly freaking ridiculous. Okay, so first of all, listen, Tennessee has great basketball history. I'm not saying they don't. Bruce Pearl, Allen Houston played there. There's a lot of history at that school. But think about everything that Rick Barnes has done since he's been there. He's won an SEC regular season title. He won the SEC tournament title in 2022. Oh, by the way, he's produced lots of NBA players. Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield was there for a minute. Whoever. All sorts of NBA players. He had a top 5 recruiting class at Tennessee. He has done everything. He has beaten everybody. He has an insane record against John Calipari. I think he's won his last 3 against Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. So the guy has done everything. But the one thing that he hasn't done, you already know. He hasn't had that deep NCAA tournament run. By the way, it's worth noting, Tennessee's made the Sweet 16 2 of the last 4 NCAA tournaments. But at the same time, this is the thing that has always held over his head, always held over this program's head, and always held over anybody who talks about them. Because I'll tell you, I'm in the national media, and anytime I say anything nice about the Tennessee Vols, you know what everybody says to me? Well, Torres, that's great that they beat this team or that team or blah, 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 or this and that. But Rick Barnes doesn't win in March. It's like, well, 1, he does. 2, he hasn't made that deep run. But 3, let me say this. How is the standard of the guy being bad at his job or overrated at his job that he has never done something that has literally never been done in school history? That makes no sense. Like if Fox hired me to do a TV show and they said, we want you, the expectation is you have to be number 1 in your time slot, even though we've never been number 1 in this time slot. And if not, you're overrated and you're terrible at your job and you stink and we don't care about anything else. I'd be like, what are you talking? That doesn't even make sense. And so when we're talking about Rick Barnes, I'm not saying that he's perfect. I'm not saying that he hasn't had bad tournament losses. But what I am saying is I don't think he's getting the credit that he deserves for everything he's done because of this one thing that has never happened in Tennessee basketball history. I do think this team is different. I do think they're built different. I do think they're built better to have success in March. But I'll also say this, Vol fans, I'm not going to be the guy. I'm not going to promise anything. I'm not going to guarantee anything. It was funny. I was talking to our guy who runs our Torres on the Vols account. We started that account in 2021, and there have been 3 different instances since then where we think the Vols are built for something, and then it doesn't work out well. Let me put it that way. We had the 2022 basketball team that won the SEC tournament, hottest team going in. We know how that happened. We had the baseball team in 2022, bad boys of college baseball. You can still get those t-shirts at AaronTorresOnline.com. Obviously, they fell short of Omaha. And then last year in football, 2 seasons ago in football with Hendon Hooker. So I'm not going to go too far. I'm not going to say it's going to happen. I'm not going to say this is the year. But what I will say, I've been watching college basketball a long time. I know what it's like when a team has the look. I've seen that game against Alabama a million times, where you're the slight underdog on the road. You're the better team, but can you really win? And then you do, and you build some momentum going into March. By the way, this happened with UConn last year. I'm not saying that's going to be the same for Tennessee, but I've seen this game. I've seen the game where you're down, where your best players in foul trouble, and you find a way to win because you're that team. And I'm really curious to see if Tennessee can be that. By the way, one last thing on Tennessee. A lot of Vol fans have asked me what I think about their potential for a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think if they win out, I mean, they're getting it, right? I mean, first of all, you win out in the regular season. You're the SEC regular season champs. That would include a sweep of Kentucky, a sweep of Alabama, a win over Auburn. I don't even think it matters what you do in the SEC tournament. I suppose if you lost early, but even if you lost early, you're probably going to lose to an NCAA tournament caliber team, if you're the number 1 overall seed. What I'll also say, I don't think being a number 1 seed really matters that much unless you have the geographic advantage. So it matters for UConn because UConn has the opportunity to play its games, first and second round in Brooklyn, Sweet 16, Elite 8 in Boston. Not saying that will happen, but I'm saying that's what it's trending towards. That matters. If you're Tennessee, would you rather be the 2 seed in, say, the Midwest or the South where you're a little bit closer? Or would you rather be the 1 seed somewhere else? Because I'm telling you right now, you're the 1 seed out west with Arizona. I've been to Arizona games at Staples Center, LA, where this Elite 8 and Sweet 16 are going to be. That will be 97% Arizona fans. They have a huge fan base in Southern California. So I don't think the 1 seed matters that much. I don't think Tennessee is going to jump UConn, Purdue, or Houston at this point. But credit Tennessee, man. That was a great, great, great win. They deserve all the praise. I really do feel like this thing is different. And I'm going to say it if nobody else will. I'm rooting for Rick Barnes. I hope he gets that monkey off his back. Let's get to some other big games from the weekend. And one place I want to start, interesting place, Lexington, Kentucky, as Kentucky hosted the Arkansas Razorbacks on Saturday. Now, this wasn't one of the bigger games. Arkansas isn't very good. You know that. I mean, I was there for the height of Arkansas season when they beat Duke at home. But the game in Lexington was a fascinating game. It was certainly an entertaining game as Arkansas just showed up ready to play, ready to go. And then in the second half of the game, and really the second half of the second half, if you will, it was all Kentucky and specifically Rob Dillingham who took over late as the Kentucky Wildcats beat the Arkansas Razorbacks 111-102. We used to call the St. Louis Rams the greatest show on turf. I don't know what the nickname is for this Kentucky team, but I will tell you this. They sure are fun to watch as they put up 111 points against Arkansas. And so if you're subscribed on YouTube, I did a kind of a quick, 8-9 minute reaction video to that game. And I want to talk about that game. I want to talk about the game, but I also will say this about the reaction video, which is kind of stemming and kind of bringing up the conversation that we're going to have right now. And that's this. I can genuinely say there aren't very many things in this industry that surprise me anymore. Seen it all, done it all, whatever. I was genuinely shocked over how many people watched the Kentucky reaction video on Saturday into Sunday. And rather than enjoying a Kentucky team that put up 111 points, is maybe the most entertaining team in college basketball, I would say probably 2 out of every 3 comments were something like this. Torres, that was fun. I enjoyed watching that game. But we don't play enough defense. We're destined to lose in March. I'm so sad already. And so, one, I don't think that's a very good way to enjoy a season. That's first of all. But 2, I have some thoughts on the idea of, is Kentucky's offense so good that it doesn't matter because it's at the detriment of a defense that can't stop anybody? First off, really quickly on this game, 1, it was a really fun game, but it wasn't just a really fun game. It was like it was just a really, I don't know, maybe fun is the right word. Because Kentucky comes in, they're coming off, the big road win, buzzer beater for Reed Shepherd against Mississippi State. But this was kind of the tricky one. I even talked to a buddy of mine who's a Kentucky fan who listens to this show on Friday afternoon. And he said, dude, this is the one that worries me. Arkansas is good. Arkansas is capable. If we don't show up, we can lose this game. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I really thought Kentucky was going to lose this game, but it crept in my mind that it could happen. And then you know what happened? I'll be honest. Final 5-6 minutes, Rob Dillingham just went God mode, okay? So it's really interesting because one thing about this Kentucky team, they have so many guys that can beat you. We were talking about Reed Sheppard last week, we were just going crazy about Reed Sheppard. I include myself on this show. I bring it up because Reed Sheppard was really good on Saturday, but Rob Dillingham was better. You wouldn't know it if you just looked at the box score, but if you watch the game, it felt like this guy made every single play down the stretch. Layups, runners, three-pointers, and ones. He had a couple great assists. He only finished with 15 points and 5 assists. It felt like he had like 32 and 14 or something like that. I mean, he was so good over the final stretch. And so when I watched that game, what I think especially stood out to me was as follows, was the idea that I don't think there is a single team in college basketball. There's a few, but not many. Maybe UConn, maybe Arizona, but teams that can just have a single guy carry you on any given night. Do you know that in this game for Kentucky had 7 different players score in double figures? That's insane for a college game. I think Kentucky has been so awesome offensively, and we've seen other great offense from UConn, from Alabama, from Arizona, from whoever. We just take for granted, like, college basketball teams do not just score 111 points. That's not what happens. But what's more impressive is it's not a Tennessee Dalton Connect situation. Tennessee can put up 100, but generally Dalton Connect's going to have to get 30 to 35 to 40 of them. With Kentucky, think about just the last 3 games. Rob Dillingham is the star of the game on Saturday. Tuesday, it was Reed Sheppard. Last Saturday, it was Justin Edwards. What did he go for? 30-something points, 10 for 10 from the field, 4 for 4 from 3. So they have so many different guys that can beat you. Aaron Bradshaw played his best game of the season by far, 15 points. DJ Wagner had 19 points, best game for him since he came back from injury. I saw Eric Musselman say it after the game. He said, that team is unbelievable. They can win a national championship. And so Eric Musselman said it. I think this team is good, but as I said, I was amazed at the number of Kentucky fans that were just like, Torres, we're doomed. We can't stop anybody. We stink. What are we going to do? I'm so worried. I'm so nervous. Whatever. Well, first of all, relax. There's still like 3 weeks left in the season, 4 weeks left. Enjoy this time. You wait all year for March. Enjoy it. You have a team that is capable of beating anybody, so enjoy that. Because there's probably there's going to be probably 62 teams in the NCAA tournament that even on their best night are not capable of beating whoever they match up with, depending on who the matchup is. Kentucky can beat any single team that they beat, that they play, I can promise you that. But really, to me, there's a few reasons why I'm just not as concerned as everybody else. One, I'm just going to say it. This Arkansas team has talent. Now, it has not gone well. It's been a disappointing year. The staff would tell you that. The players would tell you that. The fans would tell you that. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat, oh, they're awesome and they're going to make a run at the SEC tournament. That's not what I'm going to say. But at the same time, what did I just tell you? They beat Duke in December. I was there. They rushed the court. I was there for that. Thankfully, Kyle Filipowski was off the court in that game. There was no issue. But I was at that game. They beat Duke. By the way, they beat Purdue in the preseason in a charity exhibition when both teams were trying. They played Purdue tougher than anybody in the Big Ten is playing them right now. So this team is capable. By the way, they get buckets. Caleb Battle had 42 points the other night. He had 32 against Kentucky. So it's not like they're incapable. Tremont Marks, an 18, 19-point-a-game scorer. So it's not like they're incapable. But 2, why I wouldn't be worried if I'm a Kentucky fan is that fundamentally, you know what leads to success in the NCAA tournament? You have 2 things, really. Well, 3 things. You got to have guards. Kentucky's got that. You got to have NBA talent. I say it all the time. Look at the history of this tournament. The single biggest variable in March. Do you have NBA dudes? UConn had 3 of them last year that are now in the league. Adama Sanogo, Jordan Hawkins, Andre Jackson. Probably another 2 or 3 that are going to be in the league next year. Tristan Newton, not Cam Spencer, he wasn't there last year. Alex Caravan. Donovan Clingan. Even Virginia, when they won the national championship, had 3 dudes that played in the NBA. So to me, having NBA guys matters. But beyond that, I always say this. If you are a college basketball team and fan base that wants to compete for a national championship, you know what the number one X factor is? You have to be able to win games in a number of ways. If you are the old Tennessee teams, pre-Dalton Connect, and you can only score 60 points a game, you can't win 6 straight. It's not going to happen. Same with Virginia. The one year Virginia won a title, it was their best offensive team by a mile. And so I only bring it up because if I had the choice between having too much defense and not enough offense, or too much offense and not quite enough defense, I would take the latter. Because the good news, if you're Kentucky, there's 2 good pieces of news. One, you still can get better. And I know fans don't want to hear it. It's March. It's too late. We can't figure this thing out. Remember, you still have people coming in and out of this lineup. Trey Mitchell was not playing for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Calipari said it after the game. I was trying to get him going, and at a certain point, I realized he did not have it, and I had to go with Big Z. I had to go with Aaron Bradshaw. I had to go with whoever. And so you have that variable. One, they're still figuring things out. They can get better. I give Calipari credit. I know everybody wants to tell me how terrible Calipari is, but he rode the hot hands. I think he's still I think it's going to be a game-by-game, matchup-by-matchup basis. Who's playing well, who isn't. And then I think there's also this. If there's a silver lining, you can get better, but also you're so talented offensively that you're never going to be out of a game. Like, look at Virginia. We're not going to talk about Virginia Duke because guess what? They played on Saturday. But Duke went up like 22-8 with 11 minutes into the game, and the game was over. Virginia's not capable of overcoming that kind of deficit. And so Kentucky can get buckets. Kentucky can make a 10-2 run over a 2-minute period. We saw it against Mississippi State. They were down by double figures in the second half and came back and won the game. And so I get that you want it to be better. I get that you're hoping that it does get better. But I watch all these teams. I don't think there's a single team in college basketball that you can't go bucket for bucket with. And if you can score 110, 111, 108, even on bad teams, that means against good defensive teams, you're going to be able to get the points needed to win. And then it comes down to whether you can get the stops or not. So if I was a Kentucky fan, I wouldn't freak out. I wouldn't be worried. I wouldn't be terrified. By the way, enjoy this season. Think about last year. Severe Wheeler at point guard, Oscar Tshiebwe. The entire offense was missed 3-pointers and hoping Oscar got a putback. Compare that to this year. You just put up 111 points and now people are complaining. Swear, fans, fan is short for fanatic, but I could not believe the reaction on all of this when I was kind of going through stuff over the course of the weekend. Really quickly, let's get to some other results in college hoops, and then we'll get out of here. It'll be a little bit of an early Sunday night here, Monday morning. I hope everybody's enjoying these podcasts. Obviously, we'll get this out on Sunday night as well. A couple more results from Saturday that I do want to get to. First of all, let me say this. Let me give a little credit to the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I think Gonzaga unofficially clinched an NCAA tournament bid on Saturday. Remember, first of all, for people who are kind of new to the show, I'm a Gonzaga guy. And I know anytime you talk Gonzaga, there's yay, there's nay. Are they good? Are they not good? I think they're a great program. I do think maybe their best days are behind them. I do think Tommy Lloyd leaving to take the Arizona head coaching job has hurt them more than we realized at the time. But I also am kind of a pro Gonzaga, pro Mark Few guy. Well, coming into the weekend, it was a big question. Were they going to make the NCAA tournament? Could they have enough success to make the NCAA tournament? They were very clearly on the bubble and really, on the fringes of the bubble as well. Like it wasn't, whatever. Well, I bring it up because they go to St. Mary's. St. Mary's was on a 16-game win streak. St. Mary's entered this game ranked number 17 in the country, and Gonzaga smacked them 70-57. And with the win, I do think Gonzaga has done enough to clinch a tourney bid, and I don't think they should sweat come Selection Sunday. For Gonzaga, listen, like I said, it's been a little bit of an up and down, really 2 or 3 year period. Haven't been the same since Tommy Lloyd left. Now, the first year they had Chet Holmgren. Didn't matter. He was so good, he kind of erased everything. But last year, they're okay, but they get hot in the tournament, whatever. The point I'm trying to make is, to their credit, coming into these last couple weeks, they had no real bad losses on the resume, but no really great wins. And over the last couple weeks, they've just gotten some really good wins while avoiding bad losses. They win at Kentucky a few weeks ago, the game that almost broke BBN, the game that led to Torres doing a segment on who should be Kentucky's next basketball coach. That was Gonzaga that won that game. So they win that game. They beat San Francisco the other day. I know that doesn't feel like a major win, but in the computers, the net rankings that rank all of these teams, it did matter. And it was a quad one win, and it was a good win. Still think they needed to beat St. Mary's on Saturday to feel really good about an at-large bid. They do. With the win, they're now 24-6. They picked up 3 really good wins over the last probably 3 to 4 weeks of the season in the computers. And I look at them, and I think they're in. People will say they have to avoid a bad loss at the conference tournament. That I kind of agree with. The good news for them, remember, they've set up the conference tournament to make sure that they are in good position once they get to Vegas, okay? You know that Gonzaga and St. Mary's as the top 2 seeds get, I think, a triple bye into the semifinals. That was a Mark Few thing, because Mark Few was actually complaining 2 or 3 years ago. He said, I'm beating these bad teams. It's actually hurting my metrics. I don't even want to play these teams because it's hurting me to beat them. So they get a double bye into the semifinals. They'll probably play San Francisco. If they do, it'll be another good win on a neutral court. And I think even if they don't win the conference tournament, they're in. Now, they'll have a home court advantage in Vegas. They should be okay. I think they'll probably win in Vegas. But credit to Gonzaga. And I'll also say this too. They are now in their last, let's take a look here. So they fell to Santa Clara on January 11th. And at that point, they were 11-5. They are currently 24-6, meaning they're 15-1 over the last 16 games. They're playing well. They've kind of figured out their guys. Graham Ike, the transfer from Wyoming, was awesome on Saturday night. 24 points for him. Ryan Nembhard, 20 points, 10 assists. I actually really like this Gonzaga team. Listen, that's going to be a team. Like, you put Gonzaga in that 8-9 spot, like Arizona fans are already freaking out because there's a history of Arizona and Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, again, Arizona's head coach came from Gonzaga. You see Gonzaga as a 9 seed in your bracket, good freaking luck. But I think this win just about got them in. We will see what happens from there. Only other result from the weekend that I do want to talk to, by the way, producer Matt, I don't know if there's any questions. We can get to them at the end. If there are, let me know. If not, we can address them momentarily. But I do want to hit on one final team, one final game, and that is Sunday afternoon, Storrs, Connecticut, where the big CBS crew, Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, Tracy Wolfson. The last time we saw Tracy Wolfson, she was with the GOAT Patrick Mahomes. Now she's with the GOAT Dan Hurley as UConn beats Seton Hall 91-51. And how about this? UConn with the win clinches their first outright Big East title since 1999. Now, to be clear, they weren't in the Big East for all those years. And to be clear, they had a couple split Big East titles. 06 was the most recent one. 04, I think 01, 02, whatever. First outright title since 99. First title of any sort since 2006. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. By the way, I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation with Hassan Diarra of UConn a few days ago. Hassan's going to be back with us this week. I was texting him after the game. He's excited to rejoin us. I think that will be a weekly thing going forward. But I bring it up because with the win, UConn wins the Big East regular season title. As I said, I think at this point, I don't really see the scenario where they are not the number 1 seed in the East. Final 2 games at Marquette, at Providence, even if they were to lose those 2 games and even if they were to lose in the first round of the Big East tournament, those are all really quad 1 games. So they would be good losses in the computers. I don't see the scenario where they're not the number 1 seed in the East. And again, you give UConn the path through Brooklyn and Boston, that is very advantageous. Same time, really quickly, I just want to spend a moment, and we talked about this a lot around the Final Four last year. I just want to give Dan Hurley a quick shout out. By the way, Dan Hurley showed up to Ted's Bar. UConn fans, you know what Ted's is. It's the on-campus place to be. Dan Hurley shows up to Ted's in his blazer after the game. I don't know if he had a couple of drinks. He probably didn't, but he and his wife, Andrea, showed up at the bar after the game. That was cool. Dan Hurley, people's coach. But I just want to give him credit one more time because I don't think people fully realize what he took over and how bad it was. 2018, he gets the job from Kevin Ollie. I get that UConn had success even under Kevin Ollie. They won a national championship in 2014, okay? But we all know that was at it was Jim Calhoun's players. Shabazz Napier was on the team. Ryan Boatwright was on the team, whatever. But Dan Hurley took over a program that was coming off back-to-back losing seasons. I actually asked him about this at the Final Four, and he said, look, I know everybody thinks we're UConn. It was really bad here. He said and this isn't a knock, but he said, like, the players didn't look like what UConn players should look like: size, speed, athleticism. He didn't say this part, so I don't want him to be misquoted. But if you watched as a fan like I did, it was pretty obvious they just weren't good enough. And things had dipped. Things had been really bad. Back-to-back losing seasons. Year one was a losing season. And I think it's easy to just sit there and say, oh, it's UConn, they're going to figure it out. Well, no, it's no guarantee. And so I give him so much credit because he has elevated things so much where, as I just said, they now have 3 guys off last year's team that are in the NBA. They have probably 4 to 5 guys on this year's team that are going to the NBA in the next year or two. And it's just incredible what he's done. 2020 tournament is canceled, but they were finally starting to play well the final 2-3 weeks of the season. Make the tournament in 2021, end up losing in the first round. Make the tournament in 2022, end up losing in the first round. Last year, that magical run. But then to, on top of that, do what he's done this year. Remember, UConn hadn't been number one, even in a national championship run last year. UConn was never number one in the country at any point last year. They become number one in the country in January. They stay there for about 4, 5, 6 weeks. First time since 2009, they are number one in the country. As I just said, first Big East regular season outright title since 1999. First Big East regular season title split or otherwise since 2006. And there's plenty more to come. Guy's like 51 years old. He ain't going anywhere. And I'm here to tell you, man, as a fan, as a consumer, there isn't a guy in America that I would trade for him. And that's no disrespect. It's just the truth. So credit to UConn. First Big East championship since 1999. Best is yet to come. And here's the cool part. You will get a firsthand experience of what it was like being in Gamble Pavilion on Sunday afternoon, because Hassan Diarra will join us on Tuesday's Aaron Torres pod, which will be available on YouTube Monday night. Before we get out of here, producer Matt, any interesting questions or comments from the crowd today? Appreciate everybody's support. Anthony chimes in. So we are going live here at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So I guess while I'm talking, while I'm blabbing, I try not to look at the comments or whatever. But Memphis, who we thought was turning a corner, apparently gave up 61 points in the first half to UAB. UAB, shout out Andy Kennedy, the head coach there. Eric Gaines, who played for Will Wade at LSU, is a baller. 12 first half points for them. Freaking Memphis, freaking Penny, man. It's like, dude, every time you start to believe in that team, they fall apart. Obviously, that game will be final after I get out of here, so we will see what happens there. Any other questions, Matt, before we get out of here? Should mention, by the way, some big things coming next week, so make sure you're paying attention. Paul says, appreciate your opinion. Good take. I don't want to be a Bear either, but unless someone oh, he's talking about Caleb Williams, talking about what would it actually take to get Caleb Williams to the Bears, or, what would it take for the Bears to trade the pick? Listen, I'm not an NFL GM. What I'm here to say is if it's clear that Caleb Williams doesn't want to be there, I think it's at least worth discussing. Again, if you missed the Caleb Williams segment, that was to lead the show, but I think that's worth discussing. Anything else, Matt, before we get out of here? Who should Louisville hire as their replacement for Kenny Payne? Well, Reed Shepherd's t-shirt. I'm glad you asked. I did a segment on this about 2 weeks ago on the Aaron Torres podcast and on YouTube. If you search Louisville next coach, I'm pretty sure it will pop up. I said a few weeks ago, I think it'd be Chris Beard. Now, the problem with Chris Beard, because Chris Beard, it's like a weird, his contract, even though he's at a state school, it's not public, so nobody really knows what the buyout is. But by all accounts, his agent's been talking to Louisville, been talking to Arkansas on the chance that Eric Musselman takes the Louisville job. So I think Chris Beard would probably be my number one call. I don't think Nate Oates is realistic because of his buyout. I don't think Mick Cronin is realistic because of his buyout. And my hunch would be Chris Beard should be the guy. But I'll also say this is, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, I think there's a possibility that the Louisville fan base will not let that happen. I know there's some very public media members that would not be in favor of that. So I think that's at least worth discussing. All right. I'll tell you what. I think that's it for this Sunday into Monday episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Again, by the way, Monday night, YouTube, hopefully 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm trying to iron down final details. Hassan Diarra, UConn guard, part of the Big East champion UConn Huskies, will join me. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube. Also, the podcast will drop on Apple and Spotify on Tuesday morning. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Do me a quick favor. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube as well. And oh, by the way, you want to throw down a little wager? Go to BetUS Sportsbook. Link is in the show description, the description on YouTube. You can get a 125% deposit match for your first 3 deposits. By the way, the Aaron Torres merch store, we got our Marches for Day Drinking shirts available. They're awesome. Everybody loves them. They're back in stock. But I think that's it. If you're not subscribed to the show, please make sure to do so. All that good stuff. But how about this? I will be back on Monday night, UConn guard Hassan Diarra, and then a regular Wednesday Aaron Torres pod. March is here. By the way, next week for Champ Week, I have some very exciting announcements. I will be out and about in the streets at these conference championship games, and we will have the Aaron Torres Bracket Challenge returning as well. So make sure you subscribe, make sure all that, and I will be back on Wednesday. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. Be back tomorrow. Hassan Diarra, Aaron Torres.